So you know it's 2020 when you would rather start Derek Carr in your fantasy lineup than Drew Brees. Welcome to Back Sports Page Sunday Morning Fantasy. All right, welcome into Back Sports Page Sunday Morning Fantasy Show. I am your co-host Ryan Stern. Joined with me as always, Derek Mountain, Tom Bennett. How you doing today, guys?
Good.
Doing well.
You just reminded me with your introduction. I saw an unbelievable graphic this week on Twitter. It was like 2020 fantasy for you, like perfect encapsulation. It was on the left side, week 1, Chubb, Eckler, McCaffrey, Saquon, and then week 8 is Jamal Williams and Giovanni Bernard. And it's like anyone else. Like, is this anyone else's teams? It's like this is the point that we're at.
Yeah, and I mean, I was telling you guys, I have a team that's in first place, and I haven't had Christian McCaffrey or Michael Thomas for all but 3 total games between the two of them, and yet somehow I'm still sitting in first because people that we weren't expecting at the beginning of the year to perform have performed. I mean, this has just been such a topsy-turvy year. We're definitely in for it this week. I mean, there's a lot, and especially on DFS, there is a lot of juicy priced guys, especially at wide receiver and quarterback. It's a tougher week for running backs outside of the Gio Bernard and Jamal Williams that you just, who I'm actually starting in my dynasty because I have my 2 flexes. That's who I'm starting because I have DeAndre Hopkins on a bye. I have a
lot of good players are on bye.
Guys on IR. 3 guys on IR that would have been in my lineup. It's just unbelievable. But all right, so let's. We have the NFL trade deadline coming up this Tuesday. I think I think that's the only thing going on this Tuesday. So we're going to incorporate the NFL trade deadline into some players that we're going to look to acquire via trades because we are getting closer to the fantasy trade deadline. So we're each going to come up with a guy or 2 that we're actively trying to seek out for your fantasy team. Also, if you have any questions about your fantasy football lineup this week, leave them in the comments below. We will answer them live on the show. So, Tom, why don't you lead us off? Who is the first trade candidate that you are looking to acquire?
Yeah, so I'm in a couple of different leagues. I'm in a couple of redraft and a couple keeper. For my redraft league, I'm looking to pick up Michael Thomas while he's cheap. Support him this week right here. He's, as you said, he's been out for basically every game except the week 1, I believe. People are starting to give up on him ever coming back. Now he's having the disciplinary issues, getting suspended or not suspended, held out of last week's game for, what was it, punching a teammate? Was it punching a coach? One of those 2.
Practice, yep.
Teammate. So, things are starting to look downhill for him. They said they won't trade him, but if someone's trying to sell him and just get something for him, he's a guy that can win you your playoff games. And then if I'm looking at keeper, I'm looking for a guy like T. Higgins. He's been absolutely balling out as the third wide out there in Cincinnati. Even with A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd, you're starting to see T. Higgins elevate himself up the roster. And pretty soon, I think he's going to become like a solid 2B, maybe 2A to whoever is going to be the number 1 receiver there. And he's been one of Burrow's favorite targets. I mean, he's a guy that hasn't had less than 5 targets in a game since he didn't play in week 1. So if I'm looking for wide receiver help like I am in most of my leagues, those are the 2 guys I'm aiming for.
Derek, who are guys that you're actively trying to seek out?
All right, so I'll stick with running backs. I'll give you 2 for redraft, 2 for keepers. Running backs are what wins you playoff games. I mean, and the way we have to think about it and go about it is how can I buy opportunity that could be at a premium, but for as cheap as possible right now. So the 2 redraft, if you're at a good team, if you're in a decent position to have a playoff spot, I'm going after Raheem Mostert and Nick Chubb, 2 guys who are on the IR. They're slated to come back in the next few weeks. And both of their offenses are significantly better when they're both in the office, both in their offenses, respectively, especially Chubb. Their ground attack has not been nearly as good. If you get these guys back in the playoffs and maybe they're on rosters right now that need wins, and I was just telling these guys before, I was trying to get Chubb from one of my other leagues, this team that's outside the playoff picture. These teams get desperate. They want guys that can help them right now. Maybe you get these guys a little bit cheaper. I think they're 2 guys to target. And for my dynasty leagues, I'm eyeing on 2 rookie running backs who have been a little bit disappointing up to this point as J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers. Before the season, besides Jonathan Taylor and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, these are the two, besides Swift, 2 of the most expensive rookie running backs that you could get. And now, yes, they're not seeing any opportunity, especially Akers. But Dobbins in the Eagles game, Ingram went down. He saw 9 carries. I think towards the end of the year, he might get matriculated a little bit more, but that's not a this year pick. For Dynasty, these guys are still in great offenses, and they are still the same talented second-round running backs. And there's a reason these teams took them in the second round. I think you could get them definitely much cheaper than especially week 1 to week 3, week 4, that first month of the year. Everybody was eyeing these guys, trying to get them on their rosters, and now you could get them very cheap.
Yeah, so I know the one name that stuck out to me was Nick Chubb. And what did we see last year? Last year we had Kareem Hunt, who was suspended the first half of the season, came in second half of the year, and he was involved in a lot of championship fantasy football lineups. He was rested, he had fresh legs, and involved in that offense. And I think we can see almost the reverse this year. We saw Nick Chubb go down pretty early. Kareem Hunt has been handling the bulk of the work, and he's done a great job. But as we get into the later part of the season, I think they're going to utilize Nick Chubb even more than they would have in a regular time split when both of them had been healthy, because I think Kareem Hunt has gotten a lot of wear that he wasn't expecting to receive throughout most of the year. So, I definitely like those picks. Guy that I'm looking for in trades is Jonathan Taylor. He may get a lot more expensive after this week. When we go into our studs, and sleepers, we'll get into Jonathan Taylor a little bit more. But I think as we get into the back half of the year, it's going to be his show. And as the offensive line in Indy gets healthier, they're going to and we need to see a little bit more out of Phillip Rivers, because I don't want to see those 8-9 man boxes against Jonathan Taylor. But he was able to do that in Wisconsin and still do pretty well. He can do it, but if we can start to see the passing game get better in Indianapolis, it can only help Jonathan Taylor. And another guy that I'm looking at is Keenan Allen. He's never in the top 5 or 6. He never puts up those enormous winning weeks. But Keenan Allen, with the emergence of Justin Herbert, is never going to lose you a week. He's always going to give a positive script. Justin Herbert looks for him constantly. So especially in a PPR, I love Keenan Allen rest of the year.
I love Taylor as well, just because he's only ran for 100 yards once. But it seems like he's a lock for 15 every week. He's catching the football, which we really weren't sure. He didn't have any opportunity to do that at Wisconsin, so that's been a pleasant surprise. He's definitely a guy to go after. I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we will, again, if you're tuning in, you have questions about your fantasy football lineup, leave them in the comments below. We will answer them live on air as we are going. Oh, yes. Tom.
Yeah, I got a text message from my roommate Yanni. What's up, Jan? He sent me in a question. I put it in the private chat in case you guys want to take a look at it visually. It's which of these two wide receivers would you start? Devontae Parker, Kenny Golladay, Nelson Aguilar, or Rashard Higgins?
Okay, so that's Rashard Higgins, not T Higgins.
Not T, Rashard. My bad.
Okay, so well, obviously I'm starting Kenny Golladay.
That's a smash. That's easy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's averaging 16.5 points per game since he's gotten back into the lineup from his early season injury. And to be honest, I think this is a pretty easy one, and it may be a little surprising to me. It's Nelson Aguilar.
Really?
His usage in the offense has been really consistent over the past couple of games. He's being utilized downfield. He's being utilized out of the backfield. He's just receiving targets in one of the better offenses that there has been over the last month. So for me, it's Golladay and Aguilar.
I totally agree with Golladay. It's tough. Any week I would say Parker, but going into Tua's first start, and he's going to see some shadow coverage from Jalen Ramsey. It's a pretty bad matchup for Devontae. I'm staying away from Higgins this week just because it's kind of that first week he's really going to be integrated into the offense for most of the snaps. So I think that's a little bit risky right now. So I would by default go with Aguilar, also because it's a juicy matchup. Cleveland has been so susceptible to big plays in the middle of the field. They've been throwing out Andrew Sandejo, Carl Joseph, Spencer Redwine. It was supposed to be Grant Delpit's spot. They haven't really patched it up in their defense. And Aguilar's been good for a big play. It seems like every single week for the past month. I like Aguilar too.
Yeah, I've been kind of torn. Galladay's obviously a must start. But between Aguilar and Higgins, I feel the same way, Derek, with Parker going into the first week of Tua. I've been kind of torn since he asked me this a little earlier this morning between Aguilar and Higgins. I would do Higgins as a flex at best. Aguilar has proven that he's kind of been a little more reliable with the opportunity that he's been given. So, yeah, I think we're all in agreement there.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Thank you for tuning in and for that question. So right now we will get into our studs, and sleepers. So we will start it off with our quarterback studs of the week. And Derek, why don't you lead us off?
I will go with Ryan Tannehill. He seems to be mentioned every single week on the show, but this is a guy that continues to produce like a top 8, top 7 quarterback in fantasy, and he has a great matchup against Cincinnati. He's at over 300 passing yards in 3 of his last 4 starts, and in that time span, he's had 12 passing touchdowns. He's finally getting a full lineup on the perimeter with Corey Davis back fully, and now it looks like Jonnu Smith's a little bit healthier after that little ankle sprain 2 weeks ago. So I love this matchup. Cincinnati's been more competitive than we've given them credit for, too. The past 2 weeks especially, they've been in tight ones. So it's not necessarily – I do expect Derrick Henry to run all over them, but I think it could very well be a high-scoring affair where Tannehill is going to be thrown in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and to me, this seems like what was 2 weeks ago, or I think it was 2 weeks ago, the game against Houston, where everyone was trying to determine whether or not it was going to be a Tannehill week or a Derrick Henry week.
It's both. And
it was both. And I think we can absolutely see that this week. I think we can see a huge first half from Ryan Tannehill and a huge second half from Derrick Henry as they're icing the ball. I like all pieces in that from that Tennessee game, and to be honest, I like some of the pieces from Cincy as well. Tom, who you got as your quarterback stud of the week?
Another ill-timed Tyrod Taylor injury has been proven well so far this year. Justin Herbert's going to be an absolute stud this week in a divisional matchup next against the Broncos. He's been putting up QB1 numbers since taking over the job in week 2. And it doesn't look like anything is going to be able to stop this kid until the NFL gets the year's worth of film on him. And he's, I think the rest of the year he's going to be a solid QB1 play going through in any format.
So I was watching NFL Game Day Morning early this morning before my daughter's kickball game. and they were saying how lucky the Broncos were to face Patrick Mahomes and then the best quarterback in the AFC West the next week. I mean, the way that they have just entrusted Justin Herbert with the entire game plan, and especially with the way that Denver has been able to lock down the running game, they're right around the midway, the middle of the road in terms of the passing defense, but without Austin Eckler and without Justin Jackson still isn't 100%. Joshua Kelly, the O-line isn't good. Joshua Kelly just is uninspiring when he runs the ball. I think we can see 35 to 40 attempts from Justin Herbert this week.
And I was waiting for it. And yes, it's the Jaguars, so I won't get too excited, but I was waiting for it. He had 68 rushing yards last week in a touchdown.
Yeah. Oh my God.
They finally let him loose. And no, I do not want to see him do that every week. I want to see Justin Herbert till week 17, but I think he should be a shoo-in for 30, 40 yards on the ground every week, kind of like a Josh Allen usage.
I mean,
100% agree.
The way that he's being utilized is something that I don't think anyone could have ever imagined. My quarterback stud of the week, and it's not one that that really brings out a lot of enthusiasm, but it's Carson Wentz, and a lot of it you just talked about Justin Herbert and his usage in the rushing game. Carson Wentz has been putting up I think a minimum of 40 yards rushing over the past couple of weeks. Some of that is out of necessity because the injuries. Lane Johnson is in and out every other snap. That dude is a gamer. He just tries to play every single snap. He really is a warrior, but the dude's injured.
Yeah, I just wish you would sit down for 2-3 weeks.
Right, but it's so tough to say that to someone who lives, breathes, and bleeds football. So, I watching the game against the Giants last week, I had so much respect for someone like Lane Johnson, who you can see that he's nowhere close to 100%.
Just the pain.
And he comes out. What was it? 3-4 times at least during that game.
He still walks 70% of the snaps somehow, though. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. But with Carson Wentz this week, I mean, you absolutely have to love the matchup against the Cowboys tonight. The only thing that would worry me is that the Eagles get up by too much too early. But I mean, who are they going to give the ball to? Hand it off to Boston Scott 20-25 times, Corey Clement? I just don't see that happening. I love the pieces of Travis Fulgham. I think Greg Ward is usable this week, but the baseline that you're going to get from Wentz with the rushing is just something that I can't look past.
Well, and Ryan, you can't forget Dallas Goddard's back, and you know how much he loves his tight ends.
And Rager.
Yeah,
you've got that deep.
I'm really interested to see because how much Dallas Goddard gets utilized early, because early in the season, even with Zach Ertz on the field, we've started to see the switch from Zach Ertz to Dallas Goddard as the favorite target as the tight end. So we'll get to see how healthy Goddard is pretty early, because with Zach Ertz out on IR and it sounds like a week 10 minimum for him. So we'll see what happens there. Running back studs of the week, Derek, who you got?
Jamal Williams, baby. Let's bring him back in the mix. Look, this guy's going to be a top 5 play this week. There are a few reasons why, but first and foremost, it's the Minnesota Vikings. This team once had a defensive identity with Mike Zimmer, has flipped the other way this year. No Anthony Barr, just traded Yannick Ngakoue. They're clearly tanking. It's rebuild mode over there. I don't see how Jamal Williams doesn't get 100 total yards today, get in the end zone 1 or 2 times. Look, he's not Aaron Jones, but he is discount Aaron Jones. I think he's about 80% of what Aaron Jones usually is. He's not nearly as elusive, but he doesn't go down in first contact, and he catches the football. And we talked about opportunity. This guy will get opportunity. He had 23 touches last week against Houston. And Aaron Jones owners, myself in one of my leagues and last year, get very frustrated by how much LaFleur takes out Aaron Jones for Jamal Williams. That's not the same situation with A.J. Dillon. It's the Jamal Williams show. A.J. Dillon can't catch the ball. He's not nearly as secure in pass pro. It's going to be all Jamal Williams today, at least 100 total yards, 1 or 2 touchdowns, top 5 play this week for me.
Good. My dynasty team thanks you for the contribution. Tom, who you got?
I got a guy that's been a little up and down. You know, we saw him explode week 1. Josh Jacobs, man. What's been going on? They haven't been favoring him. I know it's been Aguilar a little bit, you know, Darren Waller, but he played 49% of the snaps last week. I don't know if it was due to injury. I didn't get to watch that game. I was at work at the time, but you know, this is a guy that has kind of been a little up and down. And I think this is going to be one of those up weeks versus the Cleveland Browns. You know, their rushing defense has not been that good. I had the numbers somewhere. They're in the top half of the league or maybe the top 10, I think it was, for fantasy points for opposing running backs. So I think this is just going to be one of those weeks that Jacobs is going to be able to run all over him.
Yeah, so I saw the stat that it's a little bit more than 10 points per game more in wins than losses for Josh Jacobs.
Maybe that was it.
when the Raiders are winning games, Josh Jacobs is just so much more of a part of that offense. And even though we started to see a little bit of a breakout with the Cleveland offense last week, I don't think that this is necessarily a team that you can automatically assume is going to just go out and win this game. I think the Raiders have as good a shot to win this as the Browns, and I like so many pieces in this game, not just on the Raiders side, but we'll get into that in a little bit. My running back stud of the week, as you can guess, is Jonathan Taylor. Gets to go up against the 28th ranked against running backs in terms of fantasy points, Detroit Lions. The passing game just isn't there yet for Indy, and the coming off the bye, we're going to see a healthier offensive line. We're going to start to see Jonathan Taylor just emerge as the guy that's going to dominate the touches within the offense. And I absolutely love everything about Jonathan Taylor this week. Wide receiver studs of the week. Derek, lead us off.
Going off your Carson Wentz sentiment, I will go with Travis Fulgham. He's had 3 tough matchups in his little run of dominance here. He's seen 13, 10, and 11 targets last 3 games against Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and New York. He has the juiciest matchup of them all going against the Cowboys. Now they get Chidobe Awuzie back, their number 1 corner. They cut Darryl Worley, who was allowing a perfect passer rating this season, which is just absolutely unbelievable in week 8. But, they got rid of Worley, so I guess they'll be a little bit better there. But Trayvon Diggs, who I think has a lot of promise eventually, just isn't there to be an every down corner. They love to move Fulgham around. They put him outside, in the slot, sail routes, down the field stuff, in the middle of the field, easy stuff for Carson. He's a big possession receiver that Carson already trusts. You can lock him in for double-digit targets in this matchup. And just going off what Ryan said, Eagles aren't running the football for 150 yards tonight. It's unless Carson Wentz gets 50 of them, it's just not going to happen. It's going to be a lot of Fulgham, big plays to Hightower and Rager down the field, but I expect Fulgham to be in the middle of all of it, getting double-digit targets tonight.
Yeah, as I said when I was talking about Wentz, I think this is going to be a big time performance from the Philly passing offense this week. Tom, what you got?
200 yards, 15 receptions on 20 targets and 3 touchdowns. That is what Tyler Lockett produced last week versus Arizona, and that is probably the most insane receiving game that I've seen since Randy Moss's 3 catches on 3 targets for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns on Thanksgiving. Right? That game last week by Lockett was insane, and if you look at his numbers throughout the season, anytime he's topped 100 targets and over 10 receptions, he has had a really bad game afterwards. You know, you look at week 3 versus Dallas, he had 9 receptions on 13 targets and 100 yards. Next week, he only had 4 receptions for 2 receptions on 4 targets for 39 yards. That's not going to be the case this week for San Fran. Divisional matchup. Who knows who's going to be the starting running back today for the Seahawks? Can anyone tell me definitively?
No,
because I'm pretty sure that
it's going to be a committee. Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see, but it could be high. But they've already said that DJ Dallas and Travis Homer are going to get more snaps.
All I know for a fact is that Chris Carson, Carlos Hyde, and Travis Homer, I believe it is. There was a third running back. Their top 3 guys are all game time decisions, and I'm pretty sure that's illegal, like league rules. I saw a tweet from Andy Holiday. They have too many running backs as game time decisions, so they're going to be fined a draft pick. With all of the uncertainty that revolves around that running game, and it's definitely not going to be Chris Carson. I don't think that he's going to be able to play this week. They're going to want to rest him up to save him for next week against Buffalo. But with all the uncertainty that is the Seattle running game, I think it's going to be a Carson Wentz passing show. And Lockett's going to be the beneficiary of that again. And I just, I think this is going to be a solid week for him, and he's not going to have that disappointing 5-point week like he did last time.
Yeah, we'll get into the Seattle run game in just a little bit with my expectations. I'm sitting there and I'm watching last week and just seeing, and it's funny. I heard someone called DK Metcalf last week. He was Decoy Metcalf, and a lot of that was because Patrick Peterson was lined up against DK Metcalf, and even though Patrick Peterson isn't, he's a little bit of a shell of his former self. Drake Kirkpatrick is about as good as either one of the 3 of us at guarding NFL wide receivers right now. And they just took advantage. And Tyler Lockett was just, that was unbelievable. So I actually, in one league that I'm in, it's a PPR, and there's also 10-point bonus for 100, 150, and 200 yards. Tyler Lockett scored me 77 points last week.
Oh my God.
15 for 200, 3 touchdowns, and 30 points worth of bonuses.
The thing about Lockett that was crazy too, and it's not crazy, but his usage was nuts. But he had 2 or 3 drops, and he I'm sure was absolutely exhausted and made 2 or 3. The 55 or the 50-yard touchdown grab was one of the best catches of the year. He makes up for it with his acrobatic catches, but he easily could have had another 50 yards.
Oh yeah. Well,
the best part about that one was he caught the pass as he's being face masked, which wasn't even cold.
Exactly.
Well, and remember last year he had the catch of the year, in my opinion. I don't know who voted on what, but you remember that throw where Russell Wilson's rolling out of the pocket and he just kind of flips it out, and he's like literally leaning forward almost like I want to say a 75-degree angle, and somehow kept his 2 feet in. I don't understand how he does it.
His passer rating to Lockett throughout his career, Russell Wilson, is like, I think 112 or something just ridiculous. Like their chemistry is otherworldly. It's ridiculous.
Wasn't it? I think last year it was a perfect rating.
I think that's I feel like I've seen that, and in his career, it's like something like 112, something just ridiculous.
Yeah. All right. So it's funny because Derek, your wide receiver matched up with my quarterback, and your quarterback is now matching up with my receiver because I'm going with A.J. Brown. The guy can goose you for 3 quarters and then still end up as a top 6 wide receiver on the week because he's going to score a long touchdown whenever he wants. And against this Cincinnati defense, even though they're middle of the road against giving up points to wide receivers, A.J. Brown is better than most receivers in the league. And I'm just envisioning him with 2 50-plus yard touchdowns this week. I absolutely love A.J. Brown.
It's awesome watching him. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but it's exactly what you said on script. Whenever they're on schedule, the safeties their heels are at 6 yards in the third quarter. In the middle of the field is just there's nothing there, and you see A.J. Brown run a glance or a slant and take it to the house every single week in that Arthur Smith offense with Derrick Henry running the football in the third quarter, fourth quarter with his 25-plus carries. You can lock him. It's what you said. You can lock him in for a 70-yard catch every single week. It's ridiculous.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure I have A.J. Brown in every single league that I'm in. So I love hearing this.
Yeah. I have him in at least 2 or 3 of my, I think, 11 leagues that I'm in. It's just let's not go there. All right, let's wrap up our studs with our tight end plays of the week. Derek, who you got?
I'll go with George Kittle. I mean, he's, besides Kelsey, probably the best play every single week, but he hasn't jumped out as much besides the Philly game as you'd like to see it. He was hurt for that 2-3 week stretch. He had 55 yards last week in that absolute bloodbath against New England, which we said last week to be wary of that matchup against the Belichick defense. Now he's going against Seattle. They're the 4th best defense against tight ends, but I think that's just because teams are targeting their receivers against their cornerbacks weekly. But without Deebo Samuel, you know that Kittle is going to be an absolute integral part of their game plan for as many touches as they could get him. He hasn't logged a carry since I think week 3. I expect him to get maybe a couple jet sweeps, easy boots, just get him the ball in space, and you can split him out in the slot outside, especially with how scarce they are at receiver. I think George Kittle is going to have a huge day against this defense, especially without Jamal Adams. It's looking that way.
Yeah. So I was watching a clip, and George Kittle was mic'd up last week against New England. And they were showing one play where he just rode Shalik Calhoun. Like, have you seen the Blind Side, the movie The Blind Side, where he just picked up the guy and blocks him like into the stands? That's sort of what George Kittle did to Shalik Calhoun. Yeah. And then they go to the bench, and he said, 90 is Shalik Calhoun, right? He was a 4-time All-American. He dominated me in college. And then Mike McGlinchey says, yeah, well, you're a lot better now than you were back then. And George Kittle goes, you are not wrong. George Kittle has become one of my favorite players to watch in the NFL.
I'm pretty sure they mic him up every other week.
Talk about a guy that loves football. That dude's just a football player.
He should be on the level of like Patrick Mahomes that the NFL just sorts of pushes in your face, because he's what the league needs. He's a comic relief. He's become from someone who was criticized as being a poor blocker to now being one of the best blocking tight ends in the entire league, if not the best. So his transformation has been so fun to watch. So you got to love George Kittle.
Wasn't there also a clip last week? It was National Tight End Day, I think, on last Sunday. And he went up and down the sidelines telling everyone, like, hey, do you know today's National Tight End Day? Where's my present?
Yeah.
He's just going up and asking everyone.
He's great.
Yeah. All right. Tom, who you got as your tight end?
I'm pretty sure we're all on the same side this week for the Cincinnati game because I got Jonnu Smith. We already talked about the Titans a lot and the Cincinnati secondary. Anything in the red zone that's not going to AJ Brown, and it's not a running play, it's going to be Jonnu Smith, and that's all I really have to say.
Yeah, and we saw even the week that Jonnu Smith was hindered with the injury, Anthony Ferkser was able to put together one of a top 5 tight end week performance. Ryan Tannehill loves his tight ends. And we saw even in Miami, he made Anthony Fasano a relevant fantasy tight end week in, week out. Even when Ryan Tannehill was not the Ryan Tannehill we know now in this system, Anthony Fasano was still pretty good.
He's a trade target to watch out for, too, because he's struggled the past 2 weeks, but I do not see that holding up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to wrap up studs of the week with my tight end stud, which is Darren Waller. Again, we were saying how much I loved a bunch of the different pieces in this game. Darren Waller against this front 7 of the Cleveland Browns that I just don't think can keep up with him. And with the fact I love Nelson Aguilar and Henry Ruggs over the top, just going to open everything up underneath for someone like Darren Waller to succeed. And I mean, if you give him any sort of space, he's going to make you pay. Let's move on to our duds of the week, starting with the quarterbacks, and Derek, lead us off.
We've talked about it the past few weeks, but I have to go with Cam Newton, and I hate it because I love the football player. I love his running floor as a fantasy player, but the team just isn't there right now. He is so erratic. He's looking like pre-shoulder surgery Cam. He's just so erratic, sailing the football, throwing it in the ground. N'Keal Harry's not going to play. Julian Edelman's getting knee surgery. The wide receivers are rolling out are Damiere Byrd, Jacoby Myers, and Gunnar Olszewski. It is going to be a rough sight today for the passing attack. I would be surprised if Cam Newton throws the ball over 20 times today, unless they're down by so much. They're just going to try to pound the football, eat the clock, and have as few possessions as possible in this game. You can't start Cam Newton till further notice.
See, it's funny because when I saw you put that into our notes, that Cam, I was going to lead with my response as 6 words: Cam Olszewski, Demarius Byrd, Jacoby Myers. That's it. That's Cam Newton's top 3 targets this week.
No tight ends. Damian Harris and Rex Burkhead in the backfield. Like it's the most unappealing, uninspiring offense of skill players like you could see in the NFL right now. Besides the Jets. Sorry, Tom.
No, I'm really trying to think of a more disappointing team. Trust me. I'm really trying here.
I don't think you can, even though a lot of it has to go to the weapons around him, but a lot of this is also on Cam Newton. He's not even coming close to some of these receivers on his missed passes. Where if you put Michael Thomas there, Michael Thomas isn't catching these balls either. So you can't put everything onto the lack of weapons. A lot of the criticism also has to go onto Cam, and you're starting to see him be a little bit more timid when he rushes the ball because he doesn't have the confidence in his throwing, and it's affecting his running. So, Cam Newton to me is droppable for your fantasy team.
I was going to say, at what point do the Patriots go and trade for a guy like AJ Green? But like you said, even Michael Thomas isn't going to be catching some of these passes. It's really all on Cam Newton.
I think there's a better chance that they trade Cam Newton than trade for a receiver.
I agree. They're going to try and tank to start to rebuild.
Yep. All right, Tom, who you got?
Captain Garbage Time, Captain Kirk, whatever you want to call him. I don't think it's going to be a real good week for the Vikings. I believe Dalvin Cook is supposed to play. Anyone know?
I think he's game time decision.
I think
I from everything that I heard is that he is expected to play. It's what Schefter tweeted out this morning.
Yeah, so the Green Bay defense is decent. It's not great, but Kirk Cousins, he had a decent week before the bye versus Atlanta after he threw 3 interceptions in the first half. He came back and threw 3 touchdowns and had 300 yards and all this stuff. This is just a guy that I can't trust with a fantasy team because I had him when Cam Newton went down with COVID. And I had Drew Lock. I went to Captain Kirk, and this is just a guy that does not impress. They're going to lean heavy on Dalvin Cook if he's healthy. Alexander Madison if he ends up playing a little bit. Disappointing week before the bye, but this is a team also in disarray, and we kind of mentioned earlier how they're going to start tanking.
Yeah, I can see this being the Dalvin Cook rebirth. Because if you're going to beat Green Bay anywhere, it's going to be on the ground, not through the air. I think that especially with Dalvin Cook having 2 weeks of rest, I think he's just it's going to be him being utilized a lot more. So my quarterback dud of the week is going to be who I led off the show with in the teaser is Drew Brees. And in my dynasty league, it's a super flex league. In one of my 2, but the one that is a super flex, I am starting Derek Carr over Drew Brees this week. So I am putting my money where my mouth is. Chicago, even though we saw a dominating performance by the Rams, it was more on the defensive side of the ball. They don't put up the Chicago defense is still pretty good. Keem Hicks, to me, Keem Hicks is the most under talked about defensive player in the league because he plays the same position as Aaron Donald. And everyone talks more about Aaron Donald and not enough about Akeem Hicks. And he was disrupting the Rams offense all week last week. I just think that it's going to be too tough for Drew Brees to establish any sort of consistent moving of the ball through the air. I just don't like him this week. So running back duds of the week. Derek, who you got?
I'm going Ronald Jones. They have running back roulette back there with Bruce Arians. I think they're gearing towards playing Fournette. That it looks like it from the outside to me. I don't think they really believe in Ronald Jones, despite how well he's played the past month. And he had a really juicy matchup last week against Vegas and ran for 34 yards on 13 carries. He got outsnapped by Fournette, and he continues to drop the ball every single week. We know how important it is to have that pass-catching running back with Tom Brady, and Fournette could do it. He had 6 catches for 47 yards. He saw over half the snaps, where Ronald Jones saw 40% of the snaps last week. Being that in between the tackles runner is where Ronald Jones can make his money, and their interior line really struggled against Vegas last week, and that is probably the one mismatch that is in the favorite for the Giants, where their interior D-line can be very disruptive against Tampa Bay. I don't think Ronald Jones is of much value this week, and really, if Fournette stays healthy for the rest of the year, I think they're gearing towards it being his backfield. I wouldn't start Ronald Jones this week.
Yeah, so I have that. I've been dealing with that decision. I do have Ronald Jones currently in my flex in a 14. The deeper leagues, it just gets to be much harder, especially during the bye weeks. I currently have Ronald Jones in my flex. My only other options that I could consider would be, and I'm holding out Allen Robinson because even though he cleared the concussion protocol,
decoy.
Yeah,
with Nick Foles.
Decoy is written all over. But I have someone like so many friggin' buys, and This would have been such a great week to start Deebo Samuel. Oh, this and he gets hurt last week.
The best matchup. Best matchup.
Yeah. So what I would consider is I'll wait until we hear about the Seattle running backs because if we see Carson out, Hyde out, Homer out, I did pick up DJ Dallas, even though and we're about to get into, I do not like the matchups. If he's the only show in town, he may be worth a play. So, so it's tough to move on from someone who has been so good for the past couple weeks. But again, the Giants defense has been doing a really good job against the running backs, especially the ones who don't catch the ball all that well. And Ronald Jones still is not the greatest catcher of the football out of the backfield. Tom, who you got?
Before we get into it, I got a little bit of news that I just got popped up on my phone. Gardner Minshew is expected to be out next week versus the Texans. So it'll be Mike Glennon and Jake Luton fighting for the starting spot next week.
It's going to go to Jake Luton, I think. I saw they're expecting to start him.
I think it's going to be Jake Luton. So,
big James Robinson week. Houston, big James Robinson week.
Absolutely.
There's a guy you could trade for if you got him. I mean, guy's been balling out. Anyway, for my running back stud of the week, I got both of the dud of the week. Dud of the week. I got both Buffalo guys, and it really pains me to say that because I invested in them in almost every league. I'm talking about Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. We were talking about New England and the struggles they're having on offense, and how the Bills are a passing team. They could definitely get out to an early lead, but they're not going to be the type of people to run the clock out because neither one of these guys has proven to be consistent. And they're running this committee backfield between the two of them, and neither one are really getting it done. The most effective rusher on that team is Josh Allen at quarterback. And if they need to run, I feel that that's what they're going to do, is they're going to give it to Josh Allen, or they're going to run a bunch of slant passes and under routes and all that stuff. And it's really sucks for me because, like I said, I invested in them, and this week I'm so low on both these guys. I'm starting LaMichael Pirine versus the Chiefs, and I only play the two of them together, so I'll have one as my RB2 and one as my flex. I'm playing LaMichael Pirine versus the Chiefs and Dallas Goddard versus Dallas over these two guys just because I have zero faith for them this week, and maybe even going forward.
Yeah, so my running back dud of the week is also a committee, and as I was talking about earlier, it's the Seattle Seahawks, especially if more than one are available. The San Francisco defense has started to get it together after we saw a little bit of a down week or two after the injuries. They're starting to play really well on that side of the ball again, and I just do not trust the Seattle running game, especially with how unhealthy they actually are right now. So I know it's tough if you're a Chris Carson owner, and if he's who you are relying on, it's tough to move on from him. It's just so hard to trust him in a week like this. Wide receiver duds of the week. Also, if you are tuning in, thank you for tuning in. If you have questions about your lineups, leave them in the comments below. We will answer them for you live on air. Wide receiver duds of the week. Derek, who you got?
I'm going with Juju. He saw a ridiculous 14 targets last week, so gave his owner some hope after a very uninspiring start to the season. But I just think it was a matchup thing. The Titans had given up the most points to opposing receivers this season up to that point last week. And he's been stuck at the outside. He isn't back in the slot with Deonte Johnson back in the mix. He's the guy to own in this offense if he is healthy. Chase Claypool, they put in the slot as well sometimes. He's their big play guy. Juju has a league low 5 yards average depth per reception. Everything is underneath. There's nothing down the field. Even if he does eat up those catches, it's not for very many yards. That last week was as good as it gets for Juju, in my opinion. And he has a terrible matchup this week against those outside corners in Baltimore, Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey. I think it's going to be way more Deonte Johnson and Chase Claypool this week. I stay away from Juju, and I would even look to sell him after last week.
So you brought up a great name, and this is actually to what we were talking about earlier in the week, earlier in the show, about trade targets. Deonte Johnson is 100% a trade target. A lot of his owners are frustrated because they see he leaves early from every game. Deonte Johnson is the number one receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. And everyone, especially if they get held down this week, which is not out of the realm of possibility against the Baltimore Ravens. Do you know who Deonte Johnson has as his opponents the next 3 weeks? He's got the Dallas Cowboys, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, that's got top 10 potential. Top 10 potential for 3 weeks in a row. Deonte Johnson is absolutely someone that, and I have a bunch of Deonte Johnson shares, so I don't need to go out and get him in a whole lot of places, but in the places that I don't have him, absolutely.
He's the Raheem Mostert of receivers. He's a Band-Aid that gets hurt a lot, but when he plays, he produces every single time.
Yeah, he had 2 touchdowns in the first half last week. He's just he is so utilized when he's on the field.
He's such a good route runner. I mean, he's always open. He's so reliable. I couldn't agree more.
Tom, who you got as your wide receiver dud of the week?
I got AJ Green solely for the purpose of I think that the other receivers are going to get more of a share. You look at what AJ Green did the first 5 weeks of the season. He didn't have a game over 10 points. He had 2 games over 5 points in a game where he only had 1 target. The last couple weeks, he's gotten 11 and 13 targets, and that's caught, of those 24, he's caught 15 of them. No touchdowns yet on the year, and has not had a game over 100 yards. I think that this is just going to be another bad week for him. And even these past 2 weeks, he's broken 10 by getting 10.2 and 11.2. He's not a guy that you can rely on anymore. I don't think he's the number one receiver there anymore. We're starting to see Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins kind of take over his spot as the number one. And I think that come Tuesday's deadline, he's no longer going to be a Bengal.
So one word comes to mind when I think about AJ Green over the past couple of weeks, and that's showcase. I think they're trying to showcase him to build up his trade value. I don't think the Bengals have any thoughts of utilizing him as part of the future of this franchise. So that would be one reason why I could see them utilizing him this week, because if he has a good week, that's going to be 3 good weeks in a row. It's going to lead teams to believe, okay, maybe there was just something that wasn't clicking in the early part of the season, but now AJ Green is starting to show that he hasn't lost at all. So yeah, I can see it going reverting back to what we saw earlier in the season, but maybe this could be a showcase game as well. My wide receiver dud of the week. I lost it. So my wide receiver dud of the week is going to be someone who has made a habit out of scoring lots of 1 and 2 yard touchdowns to save his week, and that's Mike Evans. Mike Evans just has not shown the ability. Again, he hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy throughout an entire 60 minutes. I think he's going to get the James Bradbury shadow coverage with no Chris Godwin. I think this is a huge Scotty Miller week. I think this is a huge Tyler Johnson week. Tyler Johnson is someone that I think you can throw a dart on I don't think in your season longs you can do it, but in a deep DFS tournament, I think he is absolutely viable for a dart throw or two, because he scores those 1 or 2 yard touchdowns just as well as Mike Evans has been doing it. But Mike Evans is going to receive the respect from defenses because of the name. So I think you're going to see Bradbury on Evans for most of the game, and Bradbury has been great. We've seen the last 2 weeks, Washington had to move Terry McLaurin all around the field to get him away from Bradbury for him to have any sort of success. And we saw the Eagles move Travis Fulgham all over the field to try and get him away from Bradbury for him to have any success. And we actually saw Greg Ward have a better game against the Giants than Fulgham. So, those are some of the reasons why. And again, in season long, it's going to be so tough to bench Mike Evans for someone else. But in DFS, there's no way I'm touching any part of him this week. Let's wrap up our duds of the week with our tight ends. And Derek, who you got?
I'm going Mark Andrews. It's been a tough year for him. This passing attack in the Ravens has been pretty brutal. It's the second lowest output passing yards wise in the entire NFL. And this is going to be a game where they're going to run the football. It's going to be a ground and pound rock fight against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Lamar Jackson's not dropping back, throwing 30 times. Mark Andrews hasn't eclipsed 60 yards this year. It's been a pretty scary sight to see if you drafted Mark Andrews in the 4th, 5th round. And he gets the Minka Fitzpatrick treatment. It's a terrible matchup. The game script's not going to go his way like it has in the entire year. I'm staying away from Mark Andrews this week.
Yeah, and again, that's probably more of a DFS call because the tight end landscape is just so brutal that it's hard to imagine you have a better option than Mark Andrews. But
the only thing that saved you was maybe the TJ Hawkinson, Jonnu Smith late round pick that you hung on to. But other than that, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, Mark Andrews owners, I feel your pain. I got Hollywood Brown. It's not fun. Yeah. It's even less fun than having Mark Andrews, so it could get worse.
Tom, who you got as your dud of the week?
This one's pretty self-explanatory. I got TJ Hawkinson going up against the Colts this week. Colts are arguably a top 5 defense, maybe even top 3, and they do a really good job of locking down tight ends. This also kind of correlates with my sleeper of the week. But I don't think Stafford's going to be able to find too many open receivers, and when he does, it's going to be Kenny Galladay.
And Darius Leonard's back.
Darius Leonard's back, which makes it even harder for Hawkinson.
Yep, that's a tough one for Hawkinson today.
Yeah, so one of my leagues is an IDP league, and I was searching through the waiver wire, and someone had actually dropped Darius Leonard because he hadn't played for a couple weeks, and then he was on a bye, and I'm like, snatch him up.
Number one, who would do that? And number two, who didn't see that up until this point?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Oh. Well, I took advantage of that. So, but with Hawkinson, you look at how he finished last week, and you're like, oh, okay, TJ Hawkinson had a pretty good week. And if Todd Gurley had stayed out of the end zone, TJ Hawkinson owners are throwing stuff against the wall because he would have done absolutely nothing for you the entire game. That last drive of the game gave you the stats that TJ Hawkinson had. So I'm so disappointed in that Detroit passing offense. I had so much invested into that offense this year, and it just hasn't worked. Matt Patricia just sucks. He's bad.
Aaron Bell is so uncreative. Like the fact that they are just starting to unleash Deandre Swift is a joke.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Like,
Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, exactly, Adrian Pearson. They added him 5 days before the first game, and he's just RB1 all of a sudden. It's unbelievable. Oh my gosh.
My tight end of the week is Robert Tonyan. The allure of Robert Tonyan in the Green Bay passing offense wore off as soon as Davante Adams decided to start playing again, and I think all of the Tyler Lockett talk sort of overshadowed what Davante Adams did last week, because Davante Adams single-handedly won people their fantasy weeks.
He might do the Tyler Lockett thing this week. They don't have the Vikings don't have Owen Hill or Mike Hughes back there, and that's already a just horrendous secondary. They might have the worst corners in football besides Dallas. Like Davante Adams might get 200 yards today.
I mean, not to mention they lost Danielle Hunter to was it, I think, a neck surgery. He's out for the whole year, and they just traded Yannick Ngakoue so they don't even have a pass rush. The one thing that they had were two guys who could get to the quarterback, and now they don't even have that anymore. Use anybody who's going against the elite players that are going against Minnesota. Use them, but we've seen in the past tight ends fade out of Aaron Rodgers' game plan. The only reason we started to see Tonyan involved was because you had no Devonta Adams, you had no Alan Lazard. It was out of necessity that Tonyan was utilized, and I think he's now a droppable candidate for me.
It's funny that you bring that up right now, because on Sleeper they have Tonyan as a tight end and wide receiver, so you could play him in either slot. And I just got a message.
I don't understand why you would even consider playing him as a wide receiver. There's 700 wide receivers I'd rather play in the wide receiver spot than Tonyan.
Well, it's really funny that you brought it up just now, because 1 minute ago, one of my league mates just said he's benching Lamar Jackson and Amari Cooper this week. And the two guys he's bringing in to replace him, one of them is Ryan Tannehill to replace Lamar, which, like, okay, I kind of get it. Matchup.
Yeah.
You know, Lamar hasn't been doing good. But I'm looking at who he's replacing Cooper with. I'm like, okay, he's got Lockett as his one, and his two flexes are Jamal Williams and Melvin Gordon. I'm like, all right, well, then who's his other wideout? And he put in Robert Tonyan over Amari Cooper. That baffles me.
Amari Cooper has still seen 14 catches the last two games without Dak Prescott. CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup have disappeared off the face of the earth. But Amari Cooper is still a constant and a weekly start. That is nuts.
Yeah, I would never consider this, but there are two words for this, and it's Ben DiNucci.
Who knows? Hey, who knows? Third stringer, gunslinger? I don't know. We'll see.
He was 2 for 3 for 39 yards.
Yeah.
Sign me up, 300 yards for Ben DiNucci.
Young man, let it rip tonight. Garbage. He's going to get some garbage production, too. You know he's going to get some garbage production. Zeke's going to be good for a fumble or two. They'll get down by 17 in the second quarter.
Yeah,
that's a head scratcher.
That baffles me, man.
All right, here's always my favorite segment of the week, and that's the sleepers. And we got some good ones this week. Starting off with quarterback sleepers of the week. Derek, who you got?
Let's go back to the Vegas game. Derek Carr. He will be a low-end QB1 this week. He's gone above 240 yards every single week except one. He's as safe as it gets. He has a very high floor, and we talked about it. It's a juicy matchup. The middle of the field is going to be wide open today for nice downfield opportunities with Ruggs and Aguilar against those safeties. And like we said, I think it's going to be a highly contested game, has a chance for a very high-scoring game, and Carr's going to need to drop back and throw the ball 30-plus times today. I love his matchup today.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pieces you can use from this Raiders offense. Tom, who you got?
I got a guy that's getting a little slept on every single week here, and that's Jared Goff. You look at his numbers, and aside from the 198-yard game that he hasn't thrown less than 200 yards all season, and he only had one game where he didn't have a touchdown, and that was week 1. Every other week he's had two or more touchdowns, whether they were on the ground or in the air. The guy has been balling out, and he's not really getting the respect that anyone is giving him, or he's not getting the respect he deserves. And going up against Miami this week, I know their pass defense has been a little bit better than recent years, but I think this could be a really nice day for Goff, and I'm looking for him to get 25 plus on this defense here.
So I was upset that I couldn't get Derek Carr. Derek got him in before I could, and I know if you're a listener of the Zero Technique podcast, it pains me to to give any sort of respect to Baker Mayfield, but that's what I'm gonna do. Baker Mayfield is my sleeper of the week, and it's because of no Odell Beckham Jr. So the reason why is because we saw once Odell went out, we saw the Browns offense expand in terms of usage. We saw 4 different players have 5 targets. Donovan Peoples-Jones was involved later in the game. Rashard Higgins was involved. Jarvis Landry's always involved. Kareem Hunt got more involved out of the backfield. And we saw Harrison Bryant explode, which is why I don't necessarily like any one particular pass catcher, because I think the ball's just going to get spread out so much that I don't think anyone's going to be able to accumulate enough. But I do think it's a great matchup for Baker Mayfield against the Raiders. So I think this is one of those weeks where we can use Baker Mayfield as much as it pains me. Tom,
Since my roommate had another question regarding the Browns, so I thought it was a good time to toss it in there.
Absolutely. So it's for flex, Harrison Bryant or Rashard Higgins. This is a tough one, and if David Njoku were to be out, I would look at Harrison Bryant, but I think Higgins has, especially if it's a PPR, any sort of PPR, I think Higgins offers more a safer floor in terms of the pass catching.
Yeah, I mean, the Higgins-Mayfield chemistry is palpable over the years. Freddie Kitchens didn't really like him, and they obviously catered towards Odell and Landry over the past year and a half. But now I think Higgins has to step up. It's if it's something you have to do because of bye weeks in your flex, I don't hate it. But just out of the first week, we'll see what happens. But I think I agree with Ryan. I just think it's a higher floor out of the receiver position.
Yeah, the other thing that I've been really thinking about these past couple of weeks with the Browns, everyone kind of forgets that Njoku wanted a trade in the offseason when they brought in Hooper and drafted Bryant. He's been playing well. The team has said they don't want to trade him, but a disgruntled player can only be there for so long. This might be another Njoku showcase week, like we were talking about with AJ Green. They might get Njoku and Higgins more involved so that they can get a little bit more for Njoku, and then just roll with Hooper and Bryant as it goes on. So I would also lean towards Higgins.
Okay, and so now we are on to our running back sleepers of the week. Derek, who you got?
Sorry, Tom, but you just know Le'Veon Bell's going to go nuts today.
100%.
Everyone knows it.
100%.
Look, one of the sadder stats I've ever seen, and one of the more predictable stats, 6 carries last week. 2 of them went for over 15 yards. And Le'Veon Bell's 2.5 years with the Jets, he had 2 such runs of over 15-plus yards with the Jets. One of the crazier stats I've ever seen. I'm not surprised, but look.
You can't forget about the number of attempts it took him to get those 15
exactly.
runs. 249 attempts to get 2 runs over 15.
Versus 6. Look, Patrick Mahomes will go nuts for a quarter and a half. He'll get his 4 touchdowns. He'll get their 3 or 4 possession lead. Andy Reid is not going to show up. Adam Gase, they're long life friends. but it's going to be the Le'Veon Bell show in the second half. They're going to use him. They're going to see what they have. They're going to open his legs up. I think he's going to have 15-plus touches against this Jets team in a revenge game. I like him for 100 total yards today and getting in the end zone.
I think your 100 yards is light.
All right. Okay. So here's an interesting dilemma that I'm in. In my one dynasty where I said I was starting Jamal Williams and Gio Bernard in my 2 flexes, I'm starting both of them over Le'Veon Bell.
I think Gio and Jamal are better just because they don't have backups that will take touches from them. They have no competition. So, but I'm starting Le'Veon in one of my leagues. And I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I don't know. The only thing I'm worried about is I feel like Dillon is going to be the running back of the future for the Packers. That's why they drafted him, because Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones contracts end the same year, and then you saw them go and draft Jordan Love and A.J. Dillon. I think that they're like lining up for the future there. So I feel like if they're really trying to do that, they're going to start getting Dillon more involved. But just for this week's purposes, yeah, I'd probably do the same.
Yeah. Wait.
Boo-hoo, you have running backs. You have too many good running backs, Ryan. Boo-hoo.
Yeah, I know. I have too many running backs I can use. Tom, who you got as your running back sleeper of the week?
I got Deandre Swift, and I know I was hating on the Lions offense going up against the Colts this week. He's just progressively gotten better, and he's getting more involved. He's a guy who can catch out of the backfield and do something with it. He does have Adrian Peterson cutting in, but I saw a couple of different reports saying that he's going to get some more touches. And if that's not an indication of where he's going forward, I would definitely do that. But just for this week against the Colts, I could see him having another consistent week. So it's not really a sleeper of him beating out his projection. It's simply him just not doing as bad as he's expected to. I think he's going to have a very similar week to what he's had thus far.
So the my running back sleeper of the week, and it's fine because usually I look for good matchups, but for the especially down in the price on the DFS sites this week, there isn't a lot of value to be had. Aside from a potential like DJ Dallas, who's at the bare minimum, and it looks like right now Carlos Hyde was now declared doubtful for the game. Chris Carson, they're saying, is a true 50-50 chance to play, and Travis Homer just doesn't do it. So DJ Dallas would be the ultimate value play. But someone that I'm looking at doesn't have a really good matchup. But if you think that that Lamar Jackson can be the focus of a defense where they're going to try and stop him from rushing the ball, that means other players that are going to be rushing the ball can get the job done, which is why I love Gus Edwards this week. I think that he's going to be so far down the totem pole of players that the Steelers are going to look to stop, that he can sneak out, and he doesn't need to have a whole lot of touches to give you fantasy value, because he has the ability to break away on any touch, and I think that he's going to lead the. Aside from Lamar Jackson, he's going to lead the Ravens in touches this week. So I love me some Gus Edwards this week. We got wide receiver sleepers, and this will be a fun one. Derek, who you got?
Receiver is a position where you can truly stream every week just because of how many guys are used around the league. And I like Denzel Mims with the Jets. Yes, it's a Jet, but he showed some promise last week with 7 targets. And Brashad Perriman's now out of the equation. They've no Jamison Crowder. Who else are you going to throw the football to today? I get Kendall Fuller's has been absolutely spectacular for the Chiefs. He doesn't shadow. And And the offense did look a little bit better with Dowell, Lou Gaines calling the plays. No Adam Gase calling the plays for right now. And look, they will be throwing the football 30-plus times today. I think Denzel Mims is in for double-digit targets. So if you have to stream, I do like the prospects of Mims today.
You know, Derek, right when you sent in who you're doing for each of the segments, the first thing I went and looked for was your sleeper wideout. And you saw my response as soon as I said it, because I'm 100% on board with you with this.
I shouldn't have stole a jet from you. That was mean.
It happens. It's okay. I would steal a jet from me too. It's fine.
All right. So, Tom, who you have as your wide receiver sleeper of the week?
I'm actually going to switch who I had because I kind of changed my mind overnight. I was thinking about it a little bit. I'm changing it from Hollywood Brown to Scotty Miller. We were talking about it earlier about how Evans is kind of the 1-yard touchdown guy, but Miller's doing it just as good. Miller's going to be a lot more open, I think, because we talked about James Bradbury shadowing Evans and taking him out of the game. I think that Brady and Miller have this kind of Edelman-like connection, and it's just going to translate to picking apart the very, very thin secondary that the Giants have outside of James Bradbury.
I said earlier, the Giants have been doing a good job of on wide receiver screens and also down the sideline. The one thing they have not done a good job on are the crossing routes, and they haven't done a good job on crossing routes for 8 years now. And that's one thing that you saw last week. Scotty Miller was able to do that and take advantage of the Las Vegas defense multiple times on crossing routes. I think he can have a big week this week. So what are the three things that are absolutely that are going to happen? Death, taxes, and wide receivers putting up numbers against the Seattle Seahawks. I said this would have been an amazing week to start Deebo Samuel, but you know who you can do instead? Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk may have the best floor of any wide receiver this week. He's going to be utilized in the running game. He's going to be utilized in the passing game. We saw the week that Deebo, or earlier in the year when Deebo missed against the Giants, and it was Brandon Ayuk's breakout week where they were able to get him involved in every facet of the offense. I'm going to give you who would you rather? Would you rather start this week? Would you rather start Brandon Ayuk or Mike Williams from the Chargers?
Ayuk. Definitely.
Yeah.
Would you rather start Brandon Ayuk or CeeDee Lamb?
Ayuk.
He
didn't have a catch last week.
Danucci's just not it.
Would you rather start Brandon Ayuk or Devontae Parker?
Ayuk. Terrible matchup for Parker.
Yeah.
Would you rather start Brandon Ayuk or Darius Slayton?
Ayuk.
Ayuk.
Those Tampa Bay corners are serious.
Brandon Ayuk.
That Tampa Bay defense is serious.
Brandon Ayuk is cheaper than all of those guys on FanDuel.
Easy.
His price, he's going to be in every single one of my lineups this week. Especially because of his floor. His floor is going to be a minimum, I think, 60 yards on 4 catches with another 30 on the ground. That's his floor.
He still hasn't gotten double-digit catches or touches in a game yet, which, I mean, I'm not going to say it's a lock today because it's as close to a lock. Yeah, with Deebo out, he's going to be way more a part of their quick game and way more a part of the manufactured touches that Deebo gets. He's more of that kind of down the field. They love him on crosses, the wide receiver screen, but he's going to help fill that void of Deebo. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, Brandon Ayuk, he's going to be the guy that I own the most this week. Another guy that I think is still way too underpriced is T. Higgins. T. Higgins is still, and he's only $100 more, but he's only $6,000 on FanDuel. When is T. Higgins going to get the respect that he deserves from these fantasy these DFS sites? He's slowly becoming. Tyler Boyd is the number one in that offense, but it's not a 1-2. It's now a 1A, 1B.
It's like it was when AJ Green was healthy a couple of years ago when Boyd was first coming on the scene.
Yep. All right, let's wrap it up with our tight end studs of the week. And Derek, who you got?
We talked about him, but I like Harrison Bryant just because of what the tight end landscape looks like. He's probably going to be available in your league. No Austin Hooper again. He outsnapped Njoku last week, 40 snaps to 31. He's just a more complete tight end. I really liked Harrison Bryant out of Florida Atlantic just because of how high his floor was. He's a very steady blocker. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he'll stick his nose in there. So you know he's going to be there in rundowns, which means he's going to be there for those play action passes, those big plays in Kevin Stefanski's zone scheme play action offense. He is the antithesis of Njoku. He's not nearly as athletic, but he doesn't drop the ball nearly as much. He doesn't really get hurt. He is going to be on the field way more than Njoku. I believe so today. And I think his floor is pretty high if you're looking for streamable options. I think he had 5 targets last week, caught 4 of them for 56 yards and two touchdowns in the red zone. I think Harrison Bryant for that streamer that we're looking for, maybe that kind of Robert Tonyan guy a month ago, he fills that same void right now.
Tom, who you got?
I got Hunter Henry this week. Kind of goes in tandem with my Herbert prediction for my stud. You look at Henry's production. He had 8 targets, 7 targets, 4 targets, 8 targets, and 7 targets. He's getting a solid volume of work, and he's making as much as he can out of it. You know, he's averaging anywhere between 7 to 14 yards a catch per week. He only has 1 touchdown on the year, but going up against Denver this week, the Denver defense is not the best first tight ends. I don't want to say they're locking them down, but I think it's solely because the teams that they're playing and the tight ends they're going up against aren't that good. You know, you put aside the Kansas City game last week going up against Travis Kelce. You went up against New England, who I couldn't even name you their top tight end. Before their bye week, they went up against the Jets, the Buccaneers, the Steelers, and Tennessee before Jonnu Smith became Jonnu Smith. You know, I think that the success versus the tight ends has just come because they haven't really played a good one, and I think this is going to be a week where Hunter Henry gets more involved than the average volume of work that he has.
And so, I mean, the guy that I'm picking is also someone who is going against a team who is considered to be one of the better defenses, especially against tight ends. But I think the opportunity, especially with him being the only tight end in town, and that's going to be Tyler Croft from Buffalo. It's going against the Patriots, but the Patriots are going to be without Stephon Gilmore this week, so that's going to just put everything in. It's going to swap everything, throw a wrench into all that they do on the defensive side of the ball. And we've seen Josh Allen utilize the tight end, whether it's been Dawson Knox, and also after a half of really struggling against the Jets last week, when it wasn't Stephon Diggs, it was Tyler Croft. And if it weren't for a Daniel Jones-esque stumble, we see Tyler Croft with a 60-yard touchdown down the left sideline. And I just think that he's going to be utilized in a game script that, I mean, they could be up early, and not have to rely on the passing game. But Tom, you said it earlier. The run game is going to be, I think, very ineffective for the Bills this week. I think they're going to have to continue to pass throughout the game, and those over the middle, especially if you're focusing, and it looks like John Brown is going to be back this week, and John Brown changes that entire offense. When you have that over the top, and we've seen since John Brown went down, Josh Allen has struggled a little bit. I think having John Brown back in there can only be good for this offense, and I really do like Tyler Croft. So let's quickly wrap up our show. We're going to give our best bets, our against the spreads, and our stacks of the week.
Before we do that, I'm sending 1.5 more questions that I got from my other roommate.
Okay.
It's LaMichael Pirine or Deandre Swift versus, and then
Swift.
Mims or Parker.
Swift, Parker.
Swift, Parker for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too.
All right. So Derek, who you got? Stack, best bet, and against the spread.
We talked about it, but Tannehill Brown is about as good as it gets. Lock, other than Kansas City, I'm going to go with Green Bay over Minnesota. And my against the spread, I like the Chargers -3.5 over Denver. They're both 2-4, but Chargers have been competitive every single game, and Denver is not very good. I like the Chargers with -3.5 today.
Yeah, there are two teams that are going in the complete opposite direction for me right now. Tom, who you got?
Yeah, so for my straight up pick, I got the Seahawks over the 49ers, and then the against the spread, I'll take the Steelers +4.5.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that and how about your lock? Your stack of the week.
Oh, my stack. Excuse me. I thought we were doing those separately.
Yeah.
Other than my weekly Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stack praise, I'm going to go with the second most safe stack of Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams.
The fact that Pittsburgh can be 4.5-point underdogs to anybody right now just seems, especially to, I know Baltimore has the name and everything that they did last year, but it's not the same Baltimore team.
It baffles me.
The fact that they can be 4.5-point underdogs to anybody right now.
They're the only undefeated team left, I think.
Yeah,
and they're underdogs.
Yep. So my stack is going to be Carson Wentz and Travis Fulgham, and to go in line with that, my best bet of the week is the Eagles over the Cowboys, and I am going to go with my. It's hard to say lay 19.5 points, but that's what I'm going to do. Want to know why? Because I don't see any way the Jets can get to 14. I don't see any way that KC gets to less than 35. You put that math together, and that's more than 20. I just and yeah, we saw the Jets defense play a lot better last week. They had a lot of bend but don't break, especially in the second half. 6 field goals.
It's not happening.
Patrick Mahomes isn't settling for 6 field goals. I'm sorry.
Andy Reid's going to pull a new play out to get touchdowns. He's not settling for field goals.
Le'Veon Bell is not settling for 6 field goals. If that guy is near the end zone, he's getting in the end zone today.
Yeah.
He's gonna go out there when they're going for the field goal kick, take it as a direct snap, and take it all the way to the end zone. He doesn't care.
Yeah. So I absolutely. Like I said, it's tough to lay 19.5 points, but it's actually the bet that I'm most comfortable with this week. Along with, I really like the Eagles, and they right now
it's moved to 11. It's moved to 11.
Yeah, it's moved to 11.
We started at 7.
I'm even comfortable laying the 11. But.
I see Eagles win, Dallas cover.
Yeah. So, and we were talking about on the Zero Technique podcast earlier in the week, the Ravens and Steelers. It to me is exactly like the Giants Eagles, where if I had to make the bets, I would bet Baltimore to win, Pittsburgh to cover, and take the under. So if I had to make the bets, that's what I would do. So and it worked for me in that Thursday night game. That's going to wrap it up. Wish everyone luck on their in their fantasy weeks this week. Go make those last minute lineup changes. Again, if you have any questions, you can also tweet them to us. You can find me on Twitter at rstern33. You can find Tom on Twitter at THB315. Derek is at Derek Mountain. And also make sure you're following Backsports Page at Backsports Page. Guys, good luck this week, and we will talk. We will do this again next week.
Let's go watch some football.
I'm ready for it.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
You too.